Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In what is the safe space of the Gifted Underachievers Clubhouse, Pat and James ask, are creative businesses getting representation right?
Hey James.
Yo, Pat, what's going on?
Well, there's something very interesting going on in the world of book publishing, which is that there was a press. I don't know if it was founded recently. Yeah, it's a new indie press, Conduit Books, which launched with the initial focus on male authors.
Right, male only is kind of the word that's being bandied about.
People
So
are talking about this place men can send their manuscripts because, as we all know, men have been shut out of publishing forever.
ever since day one.
I shouldn't be sarcastic,
Yeah,
actually.
I know it is kind of a serious thing here. But we are the gifted underachievers in the clubhouse, which is a safe space
Really?
for silliness.
It's very safe here. I love it. I love it
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, it's yeah.
Yeah.
It's huge, gigantic in
Yeah.
size, scale, and scope, but feels very safe nonetheless.
Right?
Yeah, well, and I actually went to submit a manuscript for one of my clients
Mm,
because I thought, why not?
yeah.
And it was probably about 1.5, maybe 2 weeks after they had opened for submissions,
Okay.
and it was already closed.
Wow, they
No,
got flooded?
they were flooded. Absolutely, yeah, flooded. And so they closed submissions.
Is that,
And
sorry, go on.
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, is that what they said?
Yeah, there was a note right
Okay.
on their submissions page.
Mm.
We cannot take any more submissions.
Yeah, now it says we are now closed as of May 31st until further notice, but it doesn't say because we got so many that we don't know what to do with ourselves. It just says we're closed.
Yeah, well, that's maybe I'm inferring then,
Mm.
or they've changed the note. I don't
They might have
know.
changed the note.
Yeah, I mean, it would seem to me that if you're, have there's nowhere where it said we're going to have a 2 week submission window.
Now,
Uh,
I think you're probably right in
so
believing that they got flooded.
yeah,
Yeah.
and which is interesting, right? Because I mean, jokingly you said, men have been shut out of publishing forever,
Hmm.
but that's not the case. Women, all sorts of, excuse me, other demographics and communities have definitely been shut out of publishing forever.
Yeah.
But I think this signals a little bit of a sea change, perhaps.
Well, can you elaborate?
Well, I hate to do this, go too well, okay. So I'm stumbling over my words, which means I'm feeling a little nervous about what I want to say.
Say
But
it.
I do think that in certain areas of publishing, and I think maybe, mm, well, I'm going to say certain areas of publishing, it definitely has shifted away from a male-dominated space to where there's definitely more women, more representation of other groups as well. And I don't know if it then has led to exclusion of men, which means that, manuscripts that speak to the male experience, as broad and diverse as it can be, are losing the opportunity to get out and for male readers to be able to read them. I don't know. And I think when I think about representation generally, but really in particular to the publishing world, it's not about taking this one-sized pie and saying, okay, there's now fewer slices, or we have to slice the slices thinner. It's about creating much larger pie and many, many more pies. And
Hmm.
so for a long time, I've wondered if publishing is getting that piece of it right. And I also wonder the same thing more broadly, too. Are we getting representation right in terms of expanding and growing audiences and growing opportunities? And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something I've tried to figure out, I've looked into, I've asked questions, but you know, I don't have really any solid data to say this is true or not.
Hmm.
But it does seem to me that the point of growing representation, which is a very, very worthy goal, is to increase the audience, which then allows you to increase the number of pies, the size of the pies, so there's more opportunities all the way around. And
Hmm.
now we've got this publisher, and my little quick, the conversation asked the question, are male writers and readers under threat? And I think the question is kind of ridiculous. And if anybody says yes, I think that's kind of ridiculous too. But on the other hand, I'm not against increasing opportunities for people either.
I have something to, I don't think it's nuanced enough. Um, I think male is too broad. I think actually white males
Hmm.
have dominated publishing. I don't think
Right, right.
males
True.
generally have dominated publishing any more than, white males and white women, I would
Yeah.
say, have had their voices definitely heard and distributed and purchased and read.
Hmm.
And
Straight, yeah. Straight and
so,
white would be the.
yeah, and so I'd like to just add that because I think that talking about males as, you know, as a group is too general, is too broad. And
Hmm.
I think maybe what part of something that we were talking about earlier today, part of what has raised hackles maybe about the idea that males need a place where they can send their stuff is that we all know that white boomer males
Mm.
are in specifically, have kind of shat their stuff all over the world for decades.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm being unfair to boomers. Okay, it's
Uh, I don't think
I
so.
have a sore spot there. But anyway, um, so I think maybe one of Conduit's errors, perhaps, was just using the word male without qualifying it, and maybe they didn't want to
Yeah.
qualify it. Maybe they should have talked about the types of stories instead of the types of writers. So maybe they want
Uh,
more stories about male parenting or male experience in the world. Uh,
Ooh, that is so good what you
why,
just said.
thank you. Thank you.
Because I, definitely, I find myself looking for, well, not looking for, but when the things that appeal to me in fiction, like, and I think it's also important to separate nonfiction from
Hmm.
fiction,
Yeah.
because I think if you look at nonfiction, I think men still pretty much dominate there.
Yeah.
Um, but when you get into fiction, I think it's um, a little bit more of a different story, and it's it's hard for me to find stories that speak to me and appeal to me.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's not impossible, but I certainly don't find a lot of stories that reflect my experience. And I think a lot of people who would say, well, you're white male, so your experience is running the world. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, it's, struggling and screwing up and trying to be a good parent and trying to get relationships right and, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, and then people say, well, you had your space forever. And it's like, no, right now is very, very different from even 20 years ago,
Yeah.
but really different from 70s, 80s, and and even 90s.
Yeah.
So, no, not really. So part of me, I really responded when you said it's types of stories. And I think
Yeah.
that pie metaphor that I used is really about types of stories
Hmm.
because yes, for so long, if you were, a lesbian or trans or a black woman or, all these different kind of demographics, right?
Hmm.
That mean that you're going to have a different life experience.
Yeah.
Your stories weren't being told and they weren't being heard. And
Yeah.
that was, it's a tragedy, right?
Hmm.
Except for very notable exceptions.
Yeah.
And so, I don't mean to imply that we fixed it because we certainly haven't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, I think there's room for all stories.
Yeah, I agree. And if we look at Conduit's website, which I'm doing right now, there's the same book cover over and over. It's just the logo of the press. And I think we won't be able to sort of have an opinion until there's books, actual books there, because then we'll be able to see what they think they're doing.
Right.
Right now, we can't tell what they think they're doing. The only thing that is their tagline, which is publishing literary fiction and memoir of the highest quality. So they're not doing nonfiction. So that is great because it helps
Mhm.
us see them more clearly. And memoir, interesting. I'll be interested to see what the first memoir they put up is. And the same with literary fiction. And
Yeah.
so, it's hard to have an opinion on something that is just so far a concept and not a concept that I think was explained very well by the creator of the concept. It might have been deliberate as a way to sort of raise controversy, which is always good advertising. Um,
Mhm.
or it might not have been deliberate, in which case that's worse. Because they're talking about, they kind of ham-fisted it. Initial focus on male authors should have been the male experience, like
Right.
why, and then obviously male authors are going to send their stuff in.
Yep.
But by attaching a gender to the writer as opposed to male stories or male experience, I think would have been more interesting. Readers would have gone, okay,
Yep.
yeah, I haven't read a book with a male protagonist that wasn't Jack Reacher for a
Mhm.
year, I could use something different on that front.
Yeah. Well, and I also think we would both agree too, if it turns out to be a lot of Bill O'Reilly, right wing complaining,
Yeah,
oh, woe is me, I'm a white guy.
yeah.
Um, that's bullshit, right?
We'll know to discount it
And
as
yeah,
pointless. Yeah,
yeah. So then this whole exercise is completely pointless. And when I
yeah,
look at their little tagline, ambitious, humorous, political, cerebral. So it still leaves open like this vast world of shittiness. Right?
totally.
And, as with all the demographics, sorry, stumbling over the word, there's shitty people all over the place. And,
Exactly.
white males, we've got President douchebag silver spoons
Yeah.
uh, as example number one for sure. But
Yeah.
if it turns out to be a much more thoughtful and nuanced, uh, you know, set of stories and experiences, then that's interesting.
Yeah. And we could look at any of those words in the ambitious, you know, like what if it's not okay, humorous? What if it's not Russell Brand? What if it's somebody with something good to say, something
Yeah.
interesting? What if it's not a white guy? Political. What if it's about the politics somewhere else? Or it's not from a particular stance that we see a lot of.
Mhm.
Cerebral. I love cerebral shit, so I got no bone to
Yeah.
pick with that one. But I think we are going where we've been kind of herded to go, which is to assume that anybody saying male authors only need apply in this initial call for submissions
Hmm.
is a dick and needs to be taken down a peg. Because we don't know that. I think the fact that they did it this way makes me think that they either are dicks or they didn't think it through properly because it's really
Yeah.
male experiences. I think that they are trying to the fact that they're focusing on fiction and memoir, you're talking about experiences there. You're not talking about stances or explanations or mansplaining,
Yeah.
hopefully, but we won't know till we see the books.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't want to read a whole bunch of here's why the world doesn't like men,
God, me neither. Who the fuck
really.
needs that?
Yeah, nobody fucking needs that.
Nobody.
Um, and yeah, I really have to wonder, is this guy just being provocative for the sake of being provocative? Or is there something more nuanced here that isn't getting covered and, needs a deeper dive? But really, you don't know until you see the books.
You don't, that the proof of the pudding is in the reading. And I think, there is an article in the bookseller, which probably has more nuance, but I can't get into it. I don't have
I
access.
know,
It's paywalled.
I know. Yeah, all
Fuck
these
them.
paywalls.
Huh?
I know all the paywalls preventing all this information, which, the Gifted Underachiever Clubhouse does not have a paywall.
We don't have a budget for paywalls, honestly. Let
Yeah.
us in. We want to see your stuff
Yeah.
because
What are we going to build us out of? Like used velvet tracksuits? I mean,
actually, if we were smart and we were going to get money donated to us through our Ko-fi page, we would probably just pay for fucking subscriptions instead of bee costumes. But anyway.
yeah, that's true. So, so yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the larger thing that it speaks to is we're still refining how we get representation right. So it's about a growth mindset as opposed to a more limited mindset.
That's
That's
the
what
point that you would like to make, is that the
yeah,
pie doesn't need to be 8 slices.
right. And I think, in the current debate here in the US, around Trump and all that ridiculousness, it's about, a zero-sum game
Hmm.
where one person wins, the other person loses.
Right.
And for me, everything that I've ever learned about, read about, understood about representation is no, it's about a growth mindset. It's about expansiveness. It's about inclusion, not exclusion. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so it raises more questions there.
I think so. And actually, regardless of Jude Cook, who's the founder of Conduit Books, regardless of his agenda, whether it is in fact male experience that he's interested in sharing, or if it's just male authors and some controversy that he's interested, if he's using it as a hook to raise controversy and get some eyeballs on his pathetic website. No offense, Jude Cook, but there's nothing on there.
Yeah.
Which regardless of that, if you just look at it from an ecosystem point of view, if all the white dudes who want to complain about how shitty they have it are sending their books to this guy, then there's more room in the inboxes of the other agents and publishers
Yeah.
that aren't those guys. So maybe it'll create a little bit more space for the people who already lack representation.
Yeah. That's a good point. And there's also, there's other publishers out there that really try to specialize in more the right-wing voice.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're representing all the male whininess,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So they've kind of got a place to go. And yeah, I find this initiative interesting. But yeah, suspect at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of suspect. And I also think the fact that they launched with such a splash, I don't know how this guy got the bookseller, the publication called The Bookseller, interested in talking to him, but I bet you it's because he said we're going to focus
Yeah.
on male authors instead of
Yeah,
we're
and
going
I
to
keep
focus on the male experience. And so I think, that just sounds like marketing, and I don't until we see the books, we don't know whether the marketing and the
yeah.
books are aligned even.
Yeah. Well, here's the question. What if a music label comes out and says we're male only? And what if art gallery or yeah, an art gallery says, male artists only?
Yeah.
That wouldn't fly.
Well, you know what? It's if they own the business, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah.
yeah, they get the same kind of pushback this dude's getting, which is that you're a douchebag, so yeah, all that to say we have different thoughts about it. Book like publishing is quite a specific industry. I think you can get away with a little bit more in publishing because so many people
Yeah.
don't really pay attention. Um, but for sure the music industry, maybe art galleries. I mean, if I walked into an art gallery, would I notice that none of the paintings are by women?
Yeah.
Eventually, I probably would.
Well, I think, it's the pronouncement in
It's
the
the
front of the
pronouncement.
gallery or, somewhere saying These are only male artists, and is there a reason for only having male artists that feels justified
Yeah.
and, yeah, justified?
Yeah.
Or
Feels
is it,
legitimate. Yeah.
some whiny, males have been excluded for too long, so here's their space,
Yeah.
stupidness. I don't know.
We don't know. We're just speculating. It's very fun to speculate. Uh, but I will
Yeah,
say, let's pick this up again when the first book comes out. So if they closed to submissions in the mid end of May 2025, their first book probably won't come out until end of 2026, unless they're fast.
yeah. Well, seeing as how they have no backlist or any other management, things that would take up their time and
Yeah,
space, I think they could get their first round of books out in a year.
I would think.
And it's interesting that they closed to submissions quickly, so it makes you wonder, and this is true of kind of just about anything that, one, if they have this very brief window, what's the quality of submissions that they're going to have to choose from?
Yeah.
Two, does it also mean that maybe he's gone out and found authors and
Yes.
said, I want to publish your stuff? And so
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I would have done that. I would have seeded my first year in business with a bunch of people I already knew who I knew could write books and who
Yep.
wrote books in the area that I want, that field I want to plow. And then this call for submissions actually just seems like marketing to me. It doesn't even feel
Mhm.
real because you
Well,
would
they get a
never,
lot of attention.
it got a lot of attention. It served its purpose. And now maybe there's a long game with saying, okay, you guys all thought we were dicks, and now look at these two books. Amazing.
Yeah, what is that sales technique? We're dicks, so look at us.
Any attention is good attention. That's what that sales technique is.
Yeah, it's a new take on FOMO.
Yeah. It's not new, I'm telling you. Yeah, no, I think okay, so we've come to an impasse really because we've decided we can't actually evaluate um
Yeah.
conduit books
We
without books.
can't put on the bee suits of judgment
Oh, I love
until,
it.
until we have seen a book.
Yes. Yes. We need to be rubbing our back legs together on the books.
Yep, 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 yep. Ready to get that pollen going. Get the nectar.
The nectar of judgment will come down when the books appear.
Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. We'd love to hear how we're doing, so please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email at giftedunderachievers@substack.com. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and anywhere else you like to listen to podcasts. Also, please hit share and or subscribe. It really does help a lot. We don't charge for what we do, nor do we advertise, but it's nice to know that people are listening and appreciate what we're putting out. Thank you, and have an awesome day.